Hello, people. Whoever's watching. Just wanted to make a brief video about 1971, but eventually it ended up to be a 3-4 hour long video. I don't even know how much long it's gonna take. And so I've already tried 3 or 4 times. This is the attempt number 5. Okay. And so I wanted to congratulate everybody that you're watching this because, it was so long announced before. And right now it's just, getting released after a couple of months of work. And I think that's going to be a pretty decent video, although it's going to be long. So if you are into all these mudflood puzzle videos that I've already made like a couple of years ago, and there was a video about China and all these players and the puzzle that all this mudflood information was unfolding. So you probably watched the video about China. So or you heard me speaking about China and saying that China is really aggressive these days and creates a bunch of issues. Not only me is mentioning China everywhere. Everywhere and at every topic because a bunch of people did it. But I wanted to specify why China and why the American dream, the so-called American dream, ended up to be a Chinese dream. So this video is about it. So it's going to consist of several parts. Don't be surprised if I say something all over again and again, because that's just the attempts that I've been doing before, and therefore I need to edit all this information up to be some logical chain so you can understand me better. Okay, so anyways, go ahead and check this video. First thing first, I started to look at the websites and started to look at the timelines, started to realizing what was before 1971, and therefore I just got stuck in those facts and so on. So might as well let you know about what was happening before 1971, and we should start with 1968. Yes, it's already the war in Vietnam have already started. Malcolm X was already killed, and so on. So we just have to understand that China was in big trouble and a very poor country because it already had problems with many different things. So let's just start with this 1968 events. And on the 4th of January of 1968, the number of American troops on the ground in southern Vietnam reaches almost 500,000 people, 486,000 exactly. North Korea sends 31 people to Seoul with the task of eliminating South Korean president. So there was an operation, Black Ops operation by North Korea. North Korea also captures U.S. reconnaissance vessels Pueblo. The crew was released only on December. For 11 months they were captured. And the Viet Cong started the large offensive operation against southern Vietnamese cities in the end of January. Okay, so the January was rather tough. The February started with race tensions in Orangeburg in Southern Carolina because 3 black students were killed trying to take advantage of their bowling alley desegregation act. There was a huge bomb explosion on the 21st of February in the Soviet embassy in Washington. Very interesting case. So the world wasn't stable back then, if you see what I'm saying. The speculative exchange of U.S. dollar on the March of 1st March of 1968, this speculative exchange of US dollars for gold leads to the destabilization of international monetary system, and the London gold market was closed for 2 weeks till the 1st of April. From the 15th of March to 1st of April, so that was kind of outstanding. The very hard clashes start in the first decade of March of 1968, and American troops and South Vietnamese troops started to attack close to Saigon area, which is southern Vietnam. U.S. President Johnson announces his refusal to participate in the upcoming presidential elections and his decision to end the bombing of North Vietnam. So he was kind of wanted to end the war in North Vietnam, and I'll tell you why. Because that year they actually found out that a whole bunch of people died there, a whole bunch of U.S. soldiers. So the U.S. government and the leadership of the leaders of North Vietnam agreed to establish direct contact as the first step towards peace negotiations, right? And the next day after that, Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. During the week, unrest does not stop in all the major American cities. Those riots and looting, similar to what we had last year. And also, according to that, or maybe that is just a coincidence, the Race Relations Act has been published in the UK.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller,
I, Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
United States, and Nelson Rockefeller was running as a Republican candidate for the upcoming presidential election. Very, very interesting fact. By the way, about the same time, in the end of April, students take over Columbia University in New York, in the state of New York, to protest a proposal to build a university gymnasium in the area that was populated majorly by Black Americans, African Americans, and the Institute for Defense Analytical Research to join the university. So I think that was just a distraction point, but there was quite a race clash in the university, and the police seized the university building by storming it. Events continue until May 30th for around a week. Okay. The poor people march begins in Memphis, Tennessee, along with the huge police clashes in the Latin Quarter of Paris. Paris was quite a rioting city that year, and Ralph Abernathy Jr. led the procession that took place because of Martin Luther King was killed. So he was leading the process, leading that march to Washington, D.C., and it lasted for around a month. There was also night of barricades in Paris. So looting was not going on only in U.S. Looting was going on in Paris. Although in the same town of Paris, in the same city of Paris, there was a beginning of peace talks between representatives of the United States and North Vietnam, which was already announced. French government announces 33% increase in minimum wage, and President de Gaulle proposes to hold a referendum on confidence in the country's leadership, and also the stock exchange building was rioted in Paris. It was looted big time. In Los Angeles, USA, an attempt was made on the life of Robert Kennedy, who was previously announced to be a Democratic candidate for U.S. president's elections. And he recently won the California primaries, and he was killed on the 5th of June, I believe, and he died on June 6th. But French government doesn't just retreat, it's banning all the demonstrations, dissolving all the student organizations and so on, and trying to release the laws and acts to accuse everybody who was involved in all these processes. The parliamentary elections in France won by Gaullists, the followers of President Charles de Gaulle, and they win with a huge margin. And although all this, probably the people voted for them to stop all those riots that were going on. Czechoslovakia crisis, where Czechoslovakia rejects Soviet demand for meeting of the leaders and accepts the path to liberalism. The leaders of USA, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria declare the unacceptability of the reforms that being carried out in Czechoslovakia. And but the president of Czechoslovakia, leader of Czechoslovakia, declares that Czechoslovakia will continue to move in the chosen direction and will not retreat one step from the policy of reforms. The leaders try to talk and negotiate, but nothing happens. And so the armed force of the USSR and the allied countries I've just mentioned invade Czechoslovakia on August 20th and arrest all the leaders of the reform that have been carried out in the country. So quite a big strike there. President of Czechoslovakia, Ludvík Svoboda, flies to Moscow for negotiations. Okay. Assembly of Czechoslovakia declares Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia illegal. That was all in the summer.
And I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
By the way, Richard Nixon was nominated as a Republican Party candidate and nominates Spiro Andrew for the post of vice president. Okay. Leaders in Czechoslovakia arrive in Moscow for talks on eliminating the consequences of the reform. Leaders of USSR and Czechoslovakia are negotiating the conditions for the withdrawal of the troops of the Warsaw Pact countries from Czechoslovakia. That was up to October. And a huge anti-American demonstration in Tokyo, Japan, also the end of October, 21st of October. Massive demonstration of opponents of the Vietnam War in London, 27th of October. American athletes Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised clenched fists in gloves during the performance of the U.S. anthem at the awards ceremony in Mexico City during the performance of the U.S. national anthem in support of Black Power. So that's when it was started, and it wasn't ignored. The president of the United States is ordering an end to the bombing of North Vietnam and the beginning of peace talks with the delegation from that country. That was exactly on the last day of October in 1968. President of People's Republic of China, also that day, Liu Shaoqi, is expelled from the ranks of the Chinese Communist Party. So that was quite a coincidence, as you can see. Chinese and probably the people that were behind that action were starting to, demonstrate their will, because Vietnamese war was seriously backed by Chinese. And the 5th of November, in the U.S. presidential election, Republican Richard Nixon wins by a slight margin with 302 302 electoral votes against 191 for Democrat Hubert Humphrey and 45 for Independent Party candidate George Wallace. Voters cast around 32 million votes for Nixon and 31 million for Humphrey. Around 10 million for Wallace. And Democrats retain a majority in Congress. The governor of USSR declares a protest in connection with the appearance of 2 US Navy destroyers in the Black Sea. Just like we have today, rumors about the formation of a coalition government and a possible abdication of the Queen lead a massive sale of shares on the London Stock Exchange. So that was the beginning of December. The General Assembly of the United Nations declares the incompatibility of Gibraltar colonial control mode with the UN Charter, also strike towards Britain. The U.S. government is proposing to close, relocate, or jointly manage 50 of its military bases in Japan. Let's go to 1969. Czechoslovakia was transformed into a federation of 2 states, Czech and Slovakia. British government started to propose a program, and it was called Industrial Relations Policy. Sweden was the first Western country to recognize Northern Vietnam. And that was just the beginning of January. Richard Nixon was sworn as the President of the United States on the 20th of January. Iraq executed 14 people accused of spying for Israel. That was in the end of January. A border conflict between the USSR and China began at the Ussuri River that caused the military conflicts in the area of the Mansky Island. That was in the beginning of March. That's probably one of the major things that we have to recognize. So at the same time, there were peace talks with Vietnam and all the trend into the peaceful negotiations. At the same time, China began a conflict with the USSR and released their former president and expelled it from the Communist Party. So you have to understand that is connected. James Earl Ray is indicted for the murder of Martin Luther King in the United States. And the British government is sending a House of Lords reform bill to Parliament. French President de Gaulle resigns and his duties are performed by Alain Poher. That was the end of April. U.S. President Nixon is proposing the simultaneous withdrawal of American troops, light troops, and armed formations of North Vietnam from the territory of Southern Vietnam. And the Viet Cong bombarded government positions with rockets and launch an offensive in Southern Vietnam. Offensive operations. Australian aircraft carrier Melbourne collided with the American ship Frank E. Evans at the beginning of June. U.S. President Nixon announced the withdrawal of 25,000 American troops from Southern Vietnam, and another 35,000 Americans will be withdrawn on September 16 of the same year. Prince Charles is officially awarded the title of Prince of Wales at the Carnarvon Castle. We're going to talk about Prince Charles and all these connections to coronas, crowns, Carlos, which is Charles, actually, and their connection to the German dynasties and so on in the further videos, maybe sometime else. I've got a bunch of material about that. The largest army crash since the end of Six-Day War between the troops of United Arab Republic of Egypt and Israel was performed on the 24th of July. Also, huge devaluation of franc, the French currency, for around 12% on the 8th day of August. By the way, we had a war the same day in 2008, 8th day of August war, 888 war. So they like it. Soviet troops crossed the southern Soviet-Chinese border in Xinjiang. Right now we know that area is full with the concentration camps and abuse facilities. And that was August of 1969. So the Soviet-Chinese relations start to decline big time. Huge demonstration in Czechoslovakia in the anniversary of Soviet invasion in Prague. The Prime Minister of the Republic of Ireland proposes in the end of August to create a coalition, a federation of the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And so the governments of Great Britain and Northern Ireland agree on civil rights reform, probably to counter that the next day after he proposed that creation of federation. Yeah, nothing happens actually. We still know it's not any solvent in that case. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi overthrows King Idris of Libya. Just the first day of September, we know what happened to Gaddafi.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
The death of the head of North Vietnamese government, Ho Chi Minh, and the election of Ton Duc Nguyen, who was elected on September 23rd. Israeli tensions, they attacked the military bases of the Egypt near the Suez Canal in the middle of September. And British Army, by the way, the same day dismantles the barricades on the streets of Belfast and Londonderry. But quite a big case that the chairman of council, which is of ministers, which was Prime Minister Kosygin, came to Beijing to settle up all these tensions that the Chinese had with Russians. But it was unsuccessful because Americans were already in China. They were trying to talk it over, along with British people. British diplomatic efforts were very big. Southern Vietnamese President Thieu say it may take years and years to withdraw American troops from Southern Vietnam, and his country does not intend to stop fighting. Although they already decided with China to leave the Southern Vietnam, as we know that happened further. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos ordered the withdrawal of Filipino troops from Southern Vietnam. So that was rats. All the rats were leaving the place. We should know the Titanic was sinking, but not yet. Americans participate in huge wave of demonstration demanding the end to the Vietnam War. U.S. proposes a new plan to resolve the Middle East crisis, and it was rejected by Israel. It was in the end of October.
Good evening, my fellow Americans.
I have asked for this television time tonight to report to you on our most difficult and urgent problem, the war in Vietnam. Since I took office 4 months ago, nothing has taken so much of my time and energy as the search for a way to bring lasting peace to Vietnam.
U.S. President Nixon promises to withdraw all American ground forces from southern Vietnam, but the withdrawal schedule was not been announced yet. But still, around 50,000 troops were sent home on December 15. November 11th of 1969, the General Assembly, for the 20th time, the Chinese People's Republic refused its admission. And the Helsinki talks, the famous Helsinki Treaty, at the 17th of November 1969. Helsinki system lived until maybe the end of Soviet era. Details of shooting of more than 100 civilians in southern Vietnam in the village of Song Mi are becoming known. A bunch of cases, by the way, they were prosecuted in the United States, and the United States at the same time, at the end of November, declares its readiness to return the island of Okinawa to Japan and remove all nuclear weapons from that island. The USSR and the USA ratify the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Nuclear Non-Expansion Treaty, I would say. President Nixon orders the destruction of bacteriological weapons in the United States. So up to 1969, USA had bacteriological weapons. You have to understand that.
Some things that emerges from the thick intelligence file we have on Iraq's biological weapons is the existence of mobile production facilities used to make biological agents. Let me take you inside that intelligence file and share with you what we know from eyewitness accounts. We have first-hand descriptions of biological weapons factories on wheels and on rails. The trucks and train cars are easily moved and are designed to evade detection by inspectors. In a matter of months, they can produce a quantity of biological poison equal to the entire amount that Iraq claimed to have produced in the years prior to the Gulf War.
That was the country that actually recorded to apply nuclear weapons, the only one. Economic community was meeting and started preparation for negotiations on joining of EEC to, and the Great Britain. United States calls on Israel to withdraw troops from the occupied territories in exchange for a peace agreement. United States partially lifts the embargo on trade with China. That was quite a remarkable act. So there was an embargo on the trade with China and so on. And we go to 1970. We are close, guys. Just hang on. I hope it won't be very long this time. Heavy fights continue in between Israeli and Syria forces in Golan Heights. Still going on. Nothing happened for 50 years. The coup attempt in Iraq, around 40 people were executed in the following days. That's the end of January. Scuba divers of the Navy of Egypt sink an Israeli transport ship near Eilat. In retaliation, Israeli aircraft is destroying several Egyptian minesweepers in the Gulf of Suez. And in the middle of February, the U.S. President Nixon submits the Congress document that is called U.S. Foreign Policy in the 70s, a new strategy for ensuring peace. I think there was an open part and there was a closed part, and the closed part was connected to what was actually going on back then in 1971. There was also an open letter from Professor Sakharov and others demanding the democratization of Soviet society. And that was on 20th of March. Israel continued to bomb Egyptians in April, and the President Nixon announced the withdrawal of another 150,000 American troops from Vietnam. The celebration of 100 years since the birth of Lenin preceding USSR. Extremely volatile New York Stock Exchange started for around 3 days. Riots on the streets of Belfast following the arrest of Northern Ireland official Bernadette Devlin on charges of instigating the unrest. United States is withdrawing the land units from Cambodia in the end of June. People's Republic of China announced its agreement to provide loans to Tanzania and Zambia for construction of the Tan-Zam Railway. After 12 years in the Shanghai prison, Bishop James Walt, the head of American Catholic Mission in the People's Republic of China, is released. That was the beginning of July. Very interesting case, as you can see. So somebody got the money and they started to loan it to African countries. And Panama rejects the draft treaty on the status of the Panama Canal zone, which was submitted by the United States. That was the beginning of September. President Nixon puts forward a 5-point plan to resolve it in a conflict in the Indochina between Northern Vietnam, and it was rejected. Cambodia is proclaimed the Khmer Republic. Fiji Islands are declared a non-dependent state within the Commonwealth, so also strike towards the crown. On the 13th of October, the People's Republic of China established diplomatic relations with Canada, and on November 6th with Italy. So that's a further step of the process I was telling you about.
Thanks, Hugh. Good morning, everyone. Charles de Gaulle died during the night. He would have been 80 on November 22nd. Death was caused by a heart attack which struck him while he and his wife were watching television at their country home about 100 miles east of Paris.
General de Gaulle, the president of France, has died, former president of France. That was the beginning of November. We are close, guys. We are close. So, the liquidation of Department of Prices and Revenues in UK on the 2nd of November. British Rhodesian talks. Very interesting also. The participants in the Paris peace talks in Vietnam agreed that the past 2 years have yielded no results. That was the end of December, the end of the year. And we go into 1971, finally. So, 1971. Let's see. There's a website, and I'll try to screen share that. It's already 46 minutes of that. First several attempts lasted a lot longer. Share screen. Yep. As you can see, this is the website. What the fuck happened in 1971? I found it, and it shows a lot of graphs. For example, the first one, growth in productivity and hourly compensation since 1948. As you can see, it was growing steadily and relatively. But at a certain point, since 1972, as it was marked, the compensation was steadily not growing. It was a side trend, as it called, and the productivity was growing. So somebody stole all this compensation growth. And we're going to find out who that was. Real GDP, real wages, and trade policies in the United States. So also, you see this real median weekly earnings are not growing and even falling, and average real wage is not growing that much as real GDP per capita. So somebody was stealing all this amount of growth. Also, income gains, we see this difference between those who are rich and those who are not. Income growth, as you can see, bottom 90% were not growing since 1971, and the top 1% of earners were geometrically growing since 1970s. Shares of gross domestic incomes, compensation of employees, paid wage and salary actuals, disbursements to persons. Relentless 50-year declines in wages share of economy total income, as you can see. Huge decline. Also, income share of top 1 relative to top bottom. Very high growth since 1970s. Concentration of income raised, both in top 1% and top 0.5%. Average black income as percent of average white income. Fast progress, as you can see, and stopped growing started growing at quite slower rate till the days of now. Real GDP per capita and median male income, as you can see, also stopped growing. Real median male income, and males are the best income receivers, as you can see. Real GDP per capita and median female income. Well, that is quite a relation here, but still not as fast as real GDP per capita. Although that's not the case, as you can see, we have to mention that. Income inequality in the United States, as you can see, started growing from the 80s. U.S. net wealth shares also bottom 90% started to decline, although there was some slow growth till the 80s, and then we see this convergence here when we see emerge of populism. The era of populism started, as what they say, in 40s. We had divergence here and convergence after these occasions in 70s and 80s. Cost of living. As you see, new house in 1971 was around $25,000. Average income was $10,000 per year. New car cost $3,500. Average rent was $150 per month. Tuition to Harvard University, one of the most expensive, was $2,600 per year. A movie ticket was $1.5. Gasoline was 40 cents per gallon, which is like 15 cents per liter. And a U.S. state's postage stamp was 8 cents each. Also some products here. Okay, So very, 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 very low cost of living back then. Cumulative inflation, also huge raise exactly from 1971. And it's growing exponentially. Consumer price index in United States, also exponential growth since 1970s, 1971 exactly. Electricity, food and fruit CPI start exponential growth. So, guys, as you can see, I'm in this Chinese style design t-shirt, and all these frogs here also Chinese, and many things is actually Chinese here. This iPhone is Chinese and a bunch of stuff. So how it all ended up to be Chinese, not only the cultural objects of China, but all the material objects. I don't want to spoiler the further content that you're gonna watch, and let's just roll over the graphs that I showed you on that topic, and I'll just continue from this, because this is attempt number 5. As you can see, this is attempt number 5 and of that video. So I wanted just to share screen what I at the point that I've stopped before that, and we will go over that material. Okay, let's see. Yeah, we stopped right here at the point of discussing what happened in 1971. Okay. So let's say that there was a median price in Boston and New York housing, and it started to grow. So real estate started to get more expensive. This bubble that already blew up in 2008, the mortgage bubble, where a bunch of banks were totally corrupt and were playing too much instead of actually helping people with mortgages and buying their real estate. But anyways, this is New York and Boston. The median house price in New York is red, is blue. So the price significantly rise, like 200% at 250% at maximum point. The median house price in Boston also followed the same growth rate, but the median household income in New York and median household income in Boston, have been raised only for around 70%. So it's like 3 times less growth in comparison to the median house price growth. Okay. Average sales of houses sold. Average sale price of houses sold for the United States. Federal minimum hourly wage for non-farm workers for the United States. So in 1971, it was around like $17,000, and as you can see, it exponentially was growing to the high, and high was $60,000 according to this graph. Okay. Australia total mortgage payments percent on household income over 25 years. Also, it's not only in the U.S. You can find your own graphs of your country. You see Australian graph here. Also, total mortgage payments of percent in percentage of household income over 25 years. So right now it's around 40 to 30% of household income, guys. And it was like only 7% in 1970. Official U.S. gold reserves and gold price, as you can see, U.S. gold reserves were declining up to 70s, and the gold price started growing after 70s, okay? And the gold reserve is still the same in metric tons. This is also interesting because a bunch of countries involved here. There's the European countries here, Asian countries, Latin America countries, and African countries who had these hyperinflation episodes. And so, as you can see, was pretty good until 1971, and then it started to blow up the bubble in the following 25 years, okay? Occurrence of adjusted for inflation, okay? Adjusted for inflation. This is just mentioning of this in the Google, books and Google search, everything that was printed. Google already has it in its memory, in its archives. Currency crashes. The number of currency crashes, you can see like the share of countries with annual depreciation rates greater than 15% from 1800 to 2007. So only in the Napoleonic Wars we had such thing, and it all started back again and after 1971. All major currencies have depreciated all over the past century relative to gold, and it started in 1971. It's all US dollar, Reichsmark, mark, Deutschmark, European currency, unit, euro, yen, pound sterling, everything. Number of countries with banking crisis. That's a pre-Second World War situation. As you can see, about 23 countries. And it started all over again in 1970s. Huge amount of countries. Federal debt, percent of GDP. As you can see, that's the World War I. So the federal debt was around like 35%. Great Depression, like 40%. World War II, federal debt was 100%. After World War II, the federal debt was paying off until 1971, and then it started exponentially growing. And right now, it's projected to be 180% in 2015. So I'd say very, very interesting. Gross federal debt held by the public as percent of gross domestic product. Also, percent of GDP and percent of gross domestic product, and the debt is rising after 71. It has a little decline here, but after 80s it started growing. I'd say that's a coincidental evidence, but anyways, we're looking through everything I found. On this website, just only one. Trillions of dollars linear scale of U.S. national debt. Now it's even more. U.S. monetary gold tons. That's the graph we've probably seen before. External dollar liabilities and official external dollar liabilities. So it's like it's not even official numbers. It's the graph that given by some company, but they source it on Federal Reserve. As you can see, everything started to mix up exponentially after 1971. That this period, look, 70 is just like this, and 71 is just like this. So it's growing exponentially. U.S. federal deficit, surplus versus GDP. And here we go again. 1971, stuff started to be declined. So deficit is a big time indicator, right? So if your country doesn't have enough money to budget its own facilities, its own organization, its own units, this is not a government anymore. It's just debt machine. It's a black hole of wasting money. But no, they still function. Also, federal surplus or deficit. Only one time, probably at late 90s, deficit was not that bad. Federal receipts and outlays started growing exponentially. It was rather flat before, as you can see, for 30 years, and then it started growing 4 times, 3 times. S&P 500 ratio also. Look at this. Shiller P ratio also has significant points. Working hours to buy S&P 500 index. So it was not that bad at 80s, and then it started growing again. So right now, if you want to buy something, it's around 100 working hours. Speculation versus production. Industrial production has grown like two times from index of 50 to index of 120, and volumes of future trading start growing exponentially, and now it's like it's 380% of actual production. The future trading is a big bubble. United States personal savings rate also starting big decline, and now we even can talk about the generation of so-called millennials who ain't even gonna own anything. You're gonna own nothing and be happy. That's about those people and the people that's have been born after them. Perhaps my kids also. So I'm not happy with that. I'm joking here. I'm just trying to explain you guys how all these graphs are related to the narrative that I'm gonna give. Net savings as a percentage of gross national income. So 7.5% at 1971, and now it's like around 2.5%. So a huge dump here. Merchandise trade balance. Oh, that's a graph I love, because exactly at 1971, the trade balance started to decline. This is what Trump was talking about. Remember that? United States good trade balance, also huge decline. The cost of barrel of oil in nominal terms, also huge growth. Look at here. Interest rates, also huge spike here, and then a big decline. Right now we even have negative interest rates sometimes, okay, which is also explainable. But the indicator that it started spiking after 71, that's a great coincidental evidence, right? Long-term government bonds also spiking immediately after 1971, and now a huge decline. Just like here, interest rates have a decline at certain point, like in the 80s, and here we have the same. So now it's all big bubble, which is pumped by trillions and trillions of dollars. Remember that, package that Joseph Biden just announced? Yeah. Energy consumption per capita in the U.S., 1 kilowatt, of course, equals 8,766 kilowatt hours per year. So that's actual energy use, and that's the Henry Adams curve, which is very significant. Google about it, what it is. Kilowatts per capita. Okay. World per capita energy consumption. Also, all this energy started to gigajoules per capita per year started significantly growing in 70s. Ideological position of the major parties. House of Representatives, Senate, House Republicans, Senate Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Democrats. As you can see, less conservative. Everybody started to become less conservative. And the Republicans started to become more conservative. And that's the convergence point is 60s. So there was a little consensus here for around 40 years. And then they started to divide. It's called divergence. Analysis shows that political speech is now a simple language. You express more sentiments. Common UA index also says that some turning point was around 70s. Presidential elections, same most important problems, foreign affairs, that was before 70s. Now the economy started to be the main problem, and all this social control, civil rights, and foreign affairs are just, is not so important. Most important problems are economy in all those presidential elections. Number of pages in the Federal Register. As you can see, exponential growth after 1970. That's also about voting. Rating these objectives to be essential or very important. Top 4 are developing a meaningful philosophy of life. That was before 70s, as you can see. 80% of people said that was the most important. Developing a meaningful philosophy of life. Okay, helping others who are in difficulty. This probably remains the same, but had a little decline until this millennium. Becoming an authority in my field also started to change. Raising a family started to change, and being very well financially. As you can see, huge growth since 70s. Huge growth. 80% of people right now saying that's the most important thing, being very well off financially. And before that, it was a developing and meaningful philosophy of life. Okay. Inflation adjusted per pupil spending, staff to student ratio, and achievement of 70-year-olds percent change since 1970. So what changed? Staff per student raised, and spending raised significantly. The rest is reading scores, the same, math scores, the same, science scores declined. Number of lawyers and population of lawyers per lawyer from 1850 to 2010. As you can see, a huge growth of lawyers and the number of population per lawyer. So we all started to think that lawyers are important after that. Why not? That's a coincidental evidence also. Incarceration rates of inmates incarcerated under state and federal jurisdiction per 100,000 populations from 1925 to 2014. As you can see, male incarceration spiked a huge one, and the incarceration rate itself also spiked. Female incarceration rate also spiked. So it's rather flattened curve, but it did spike if you watch it all alone without male and the incarceration rate. Share of young adults living with parents rises to levels not seen since the Great Depression era. Percentage of 18 to 20-year-olds in U.S. living with parents. So in 70s it was 31%, and right now it's more than 50%. Okay. Median age at first marriage. We're almost done, guys. Just keep on keep on watching, guys. Median age at first marriage, 1890s to present. The median age in 1970s of women was around 21-year-old, and the man was around 23-year-old. Right now, the men have 29-year-old median age, and the women have 28-year-old median age. So that's decline of population definitely affected that, and could explain why we have this, spiking of age. Divorce prevalence by age also spiked, huge one. Percentage of children born to unwedded women. All the races spiked, a huge one, 40% in medium. Trends in obesity among children and adolescents aged 2 to 19 years by age. United States 1963 to 1965 through 2015, 2016. As you can see, huge spike here all the way. National health expenditures and U.S. population. Also, we see a huge growth of population of 150 million people growth, but the national health expenditures also were growing. Billions of dollars. Growth of physicians and administrators. So that's saying that people just, I'm not saying that people got more sick, but I'm saying that we see what we see. Growth of physicians and administrators. Physicians, this brown graph is physicians and administrators. Ooh. Administrators were growing 3,000%, and physicians, so probably 100%. Percent growth in U.S. healthcare spending per capita. Look at this. Ooh, 2,400% growth. And there's also a quote: I don't believe we shall ever have a good money again before we take the things out of the hands of the government. That is, we can take it violently off the hands of the government. All we can do is by some sly, roundabout way introduce something that they can't stop. That was said by Hayek in 1984. Very, very interesting book. So that was the website, what happened in 1971. I was trying to, add up some, connect some dots, as Richard Lopez likes to say. At the end of a civil war in China in the 1940s, which ended in victory for the communists, the United States refused to recognize People's Republic of China. That's probably why nobody was accepting them to the United Nations. This republic was formed officially in 1949. As that's only my addition. I've heard a Chinese official lady from the Ministry of External Affairs. She was saying that, foreign affairs. She was saying that thanks to Stalin, we got our history back in 1940s or something, maybe in 49. So the Stalin's historians gave the China the history that they right now obtain. Okay. Well, that's my information. we have to find that quote exactly to prove that to you. But anyways, at the end of that civil war, United States refused to recognize People's Republic of China, and Washington continued to support the authorities of Republic of China, the ROC, or which that was a Chinese government or something that was evacuated to the island of Taiwan, or Formosa Island, whatever you know it like, and it was recognized, and they were recognized by the Western and most of the world as the only legitimate government in China. And that situation persisted for like 30 years or so. And since 1950s, the United States has constantly voted against the transfer of a seat in the United Nations from the Republic of China to the People's Republic of China. Okay. Tensions in American relationships with China were fueled by the Korean War in 1950 and 1953, where the Chinese fought against the American forces. Chinese were the boots on the ground. And during that Vietnam War in 1954-1975, the People's Republic of China supported the opponents of the United States, these North Vietnam. But the People's Liberation Army of China did not participate in hostilities. There was a slight normalization in relationships, as I was saying in a timeline exposure I was just covering. And the first steps towards reapproachment between two states were taken in 1969, as I was saying. On January 20, the U.S. President Richard Nixon, in his inaugural speech, declared his readiness to develop a relationship with all countries. On the personal instruction of Mao Zedong, he was looking for ways to normalize U.S.-Chinese relations. The speech was published in full amount of quotes in the central newspaper of the Communist Party, and so Chinese people got acquainted with this, new president, Nixon, although they probably knew him before. And Zhou Enlai, the State Council of People's Republic, and the chairman, through the Pakistani mediator, the so-called mediator, proposed to the United States to hold high-level talks in Beijing. And so the U.S.-China rapprochement took place against the backdrop of the Soviet-Chinese crisis, because I've been saying there was like slight tensions. I would say they were even shooting each other, the Soviets and Chinese, and so relations between the two countries, which had been deteriorating since the late 50s after the death of death of Stalin, and Khrushchev took over. And 1969 reached the stage of armed border clashes. We had like two clashes I've been saying about. And this, so the Americans reapproached China with these background clashes between China and USSR. And so the first practical step towards normalizing contacts between Washington and Beijing was the unexpected invitation to China of the American table tennis team. We know that situation. We've been watching have been watching Forrest Gump video, Forrest Gump movie, Forrest Gump book probably have been read by a bunch of people. So that was a world championship in Japan.
When a long-haired American ping pong player missed his team bus in Japan and befriended the world's #1 Chinese player.
The American team, while traveling through Asia, was invited by Premier Zhou Enlai to play against the Chinese team. That team was the first group of people in 20-odd years that had set foot in China.
Mao's offer conveyed the regards of the Chinese people to the American people. The televised tour showed the new friendly face of China to the world.
The American table tennis team was invited, and the Americans made a week-long tour in to the People's Republic of China, which was the first visit of an official American delegation to this country. They took place in April 1971. So might as well keep that in mind. The following year, Chinese tennis players paid a return visit to the United States, and the press called these trips ping-pong diplomacy. Okay. And what about Richard Nixon's visit? An agreement in principle on the summit was reached in secret talk between the U.S. National Security Assistant Henry Kissinger, who has this ping-pong diplomacy thing, and he was the head of he was talking to the head of People's Republic of China, Zhou Enlai, and so they scheduled a meeting in November of 1971 in Beijing. Despite the anticipated warming of relations, in October 1971, at the meeting of the UN General Assembly, the United States voted against the resolution on the transfer of rights of representation to the People's Republic of China in the United Nations. So that was just the month before the visit, and they still voted against. Okay, and we're gonna cover that thing again. The first ever visit of the U.S. president to China took place on February 28. In 1972, and Nixon held talks with Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai. As a result of these meetings, a joint statement was made, also known as a Shanghai Communique. In this document, the Chinese side called the issue of Taiwan's status as a key problem in relationships between the two countries. For its part, the United States announced its refusal to use terms other than one China. The People's Republic of China authorities consider it unacceptable to describe the Taiwan problem using the expression of China and Taiwan or to China, and consider this matter of principle. And so the parties agreed to establish diplomatic ties at the level of special envoys, who began to work in May 1973. The first American representative was a high-ranking intelligence officer and former ambassador of France, Germany, and Great Britain. That was David Bruce, if I remember. In 1974, he was replaced by the future president of United States, George W. Bush Sr. That's a coincidence. The first Chinese envoy in the former ambassador of France, Huan Zheng. American public opinion praised the results of Nixon's visit, and 73% of Americans approved of the results of the trip. And so that was quite interesting. Establishment of diplomatic relationship and further expansion of ties continued on December 16 in 1978. The parties issued a joint communique on the establishment of diplomatic relations. On January 1979, 1979, by the way, that's the year I was born. That's quite a coincidence. The United States officially recognized the People's Republic of China, after which Deputy Premier of State Council of the People's Republic of China, Deng Xiaoping, visited Washington. Deng Xiaoping was not that easy. He was the head of a military committee, which has one of the highest rankings in Chinese pyramid of power, and so he was like an emperor of China, although he was a deputy premier of the state council. No, he was very, very high level person, where he met the U.S. President Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter. That's if you haven't watched my Crown and Ray Bradbury videos, you don't even know what I'm trying to give you a hint to. The Carter wasn't that easy, wasn't that stupid, and so on. During the trip, issues related to the development of bilateral relations were discussed. In particular, several agreements were signed in the field of scientific and technical cooperation. By that time, all that the Chinese received from Stalin, they already lost most of it because it was like technologically retarded. Now, those were the technologies of the World War II, and it's almost 80s when they met with American President Jimmy Carter, and he bought them with all these technologies that United States and the Westerns have obtained by that time. Okay, and further, this scientific and technical cooperation ended up in progress in economy, and this emerging economy of China became the fastest in growing economies. Okay, further Sino-American rapprochement was influenced by the entry of Soviet troops into Afghanistan. China, like the United States, regarded the actions of the USSR as an aggression against an independent state. In 1980, the Chinese team joined the boycott of Moscow Olympics. That was like confirmation of whatever they were discussing with Carter, because U.S. versus USSR was the game that they were playing. Okay. Since 1979, the two countries have made significant progress in the trade and economic sphere, and 1978, the trade turnover between the People's Republic of China and the United States amounted to 1.1 billion. Then in 1984, it was already 7 billion. In 2016, it became 519 billion. And I believe right now it's around the trillion. In addition, China gained access to a number of U.S. military technologies, purchased S-70 helicopters, anti-tank missile systems, torpedoes, and navigation equipment. Also, China was given access to some American intelligence data on the Soviet military infrastructure.